Files an emergency motion to stop Big Fanny. She's trying to make that arrest happen. There's a back and forth that goes on. And ultimately, they need more time. So after a series of exchanges, we fast forward through all of that, okay? And now we see this email that came out from Fanny on Tuesday, August 22nd. They're having this back and forth email from Fanny. Good morning, Mr. Moran. I am not granting any extensions. I gave 2 weeks for people to surrender themselves to the court. Your client is no different than any other criminal defendant in this jurisdiction. Which obviously we know is total nonsense. They keep repeating that, but it's not true because Trump is treated very differently. For example, they gave him a $200,000 consent bond. That's strange. A lot of other people who are charged with very similar crimes are held without custody, without bail, in custody. So Fanny says, 2 weeks was a tremendous courtesy. At 12:30 p.m. on Friday, if you're not here, if your butt's not here, Mark, I shall file warrants in the system. My team has availability to discuss reasonable consent bonds Wednesday and Thursday. So Mark's and his team, they're not even wanting this consent bond. They're saying, no, there's no bond. We're not self-surrendering. You don't even have this case. Yours in service for the Democrats. Fanny T. Willis, biggest Fanny in Georgia. Now, I don't know why. She should put that in her signature. There is no bigger Fanny than the district attorney for the Atlanta Judicial Circuit out of Fulton County, Georgia. So, yeah. Anyways, all right, so that's Big Fanny. Now, this is another letter. Said, all right, well, here's another letter on behalf of our client, and this was the letter attached. We're also going to send a hard copy. That was the one saying no extension. So she says, nope, don't even think about it. Warrants if you're not here. And they say, well, obviously that's not something that we're interested in doing. We're not going to show up there. You don't have jurisdiction over us. And so what did they do? They filed an emergency request. They said, all right, well, you're going to issue an arrest warrant. We're going to go talk to the federal judge about this. 3-page filing. In the Northern District of Georgia, this is the federal district court. It's the Mark Meadows case. This is the declaration, so let's come back to that. This is the emergency motion. This is a 19-page filing from Mark Meadows. He's saying, we need some help, Judge. Emergency motion for the immediate removal and or for an order prohibiting DA Big Fanny Willis from arresting defendant Mark Meadows. Do not let her conduct this arrest. The judge says, or Mark Meadows' defense says, Your Honor, Mark Meadows moves this court promptly to permit removal and notify the state court without a hearing. I know we're scheduled for a hearing, but we need this case removed before noon on August 25th because Fanny is threatening to arrest my client. We've got to protect Meadows from an arrest prior to this upcoming hearing on the removal. Granting removal immediately and notifying the state court is the most efficient way to effectuate relief. Federal courts have permitted removal without first holding evidentiary hearings. There's some case law to support that claim. Now, if you don't do this, if you don't remove this immediately, Your Honor, alternatively, the court can grant relief by issuing an order that Big Fanny Willis, the biggest Fanny in Fulton County, who is a party to the matter before the court, can issue an order to her prohibiting her from arresting or causing the arrest of Mr. Meadows before the Monday hearing. So Meadows is going to make his arguments in front of the judge on Monday. Fanny says your deadline is Friday, and if you are not in my jurisdiction self-surrendered with a consent bond, there's going to be a warrant for your arrest. And then what's he going to do? Show up on Monday in federal court with a warrant? Meadows says immediate relief is necessary. District Attorney Big Fanny has made clear that she intends to arrest Mr. Meadows before this court's Monday hearing and has rejected out of hand a reasonable request to defer 1 business day. Just move it 1 day until after this court's hearing. Of course not. There's no one's above the law. Ugh. Absent this court's intervention, federal judge, Mr. Meadows is going to be denied protection from the arrest that federal law affords towards federal officials. This is why we have this federal supremacy stuff, so that little partisan hacked state prosecutors can't do this stuff. That's why this court's prompt but orderly consideration of removal will be frustrated. He filed immediately, and remember, Mark has been like rapid speed for this reason, because he knew that there was going to be a deadline coming up, and he's not showing up with a consent bond and posting money for a crime that he didn't do. So he's saying, Judge, you've got jurisdiction, and the law provides me with immediate right to removal. And now she's trying to frustrate that because you set a hearing. So in other words, she's trying to undermine your efforts, Your Honor. It says, Judge, let's just remember this. The Supremacy Clause protects federal officials from being arrested. Okay, that's the quote in bold. And being brought to trial in state court. That's from a Supreme Court case in 1880. Not just being convicted and sentenced, right? It's also the arrest. It's not just the later parts of this, which is a conviction and a sentence. It's what starts the whole thing off. Congress has also said that when cases are removed federally, the state proceedings must be halted immediately if the case is civil and after prompt consideration if the case is criminal. Mark Meadows says, I've been very prompt, Judge. We've moved quickly as possible to remove the case. Consistent with this, and this court has acted promptly. On Wednesday, August 16th, the court entered an order holding that the notice of removal is sufficient to withstand summary remand and set this for a hearing on Monday, the 28th. Earlier that day, Meadows' lawyers had made efforts to meet and confer with Fani about this removal. But they, at Fani's office, informed the lawyers that no one from the DA's office would be available until Monday, August 21st, right? So they file it the 16th. It's going to take them a while to get back. Well, of course they want to delay. So that Mark has no choice but to show up for their deadline. At 10:30 a.m., Monday, August 21st, defense finally spoke with Big Fani's office, and they informed counsel of their firm terms for a consent bond. Fani said, nope, Meadows would be arrested if he does not voluntarily appear before noon Friday, August 25th, even though the federal court has set a hearing to determine whether removal is warranted or not on that following Monday. On the afternoon of that Monday, counsel for Meadows sent Big Fani a request of a modest extension, not long at all, noting that this court set a hearing for Monday. They said, well, it would be eminently reasonable for Mark Meadows to surrender next week after the hearing in federal court. Counsel further stated that if DA Willis agreed to additional time, that we could meet and confer and we could do this promptly, quickly in Fulton County. But this morning, Big Fani said the following: I'm not granting any extensions. I gave 2 weeks for people to surrender. Your client's no different than anybody else. Rah! Counsel responded earlier and said, yeah, guess what? Mark Meadows is different than other county defendants. Why? He's a former federal official. Other people are not. The laws are different from former federal officials, just like the laws are different for, let's say, police officers or prosecutors or other federal officials that get alleged to have committed some sort of malfeasance. He has a pending notice of removal. Other people don't have those same claims. Now, Fani doesn't care about that. The court says Meadows and his defense should promptly grant relief to prevent Meadows from irreparably losing his right under federal law to be free from state prosecutor hacks who try to make arrests. Some other courts have allowed this before without having a hearing. When it's efficient and effective, sometimes courts should do it. They cite some law. They say a defendant can remove the federal case if the following 2 things are met. We've talked a lot about this. You see, when we see all these italics and parentheses, this is authority. So just to highlight some of these, we've got the Supreme Court case here, Jefferson. We've got another United States Constitution's a good one. Here's another one, United States 1890 Supreme Court, 11th Circuit 2009, another 11th Circuit, here another 11th Circuit. They say, look, that is enough, okay? Mr. Meadows need not win his case before he can have it removed. He doesn't have to go to trial and secure victory. The standard for removal, Judge, is even easier to meet than the standard for asserting the Supremacy Clause immunity on the merits. Prompt action is needed to spare Meadows the cost of defending himself in state court, which is the exact reason we have the Supremacy Clause in the first place. Unfortunately, Big Fani is set on subjecting Mr. Meadows to criminal process in Georgia as quickly as it can, without regard to his pending efforts in federal court. In addition to threatening an arrest on Friday, the state has also sought a scheduling order that would proceed exceptionally fast for a 19-defendant, 41-count prosecution. After the arrest, they want an arraignment on September 8th, Friday, and therefore they say time is of the essence. They're moving quickly. Judge, you've got to move quickly too. Now, if you don't grant a removal immediately to take this away from her, we ask the court now to issue an order to Fani to not arrest Meadows before the hearing on Monday. This short-term relief would prevent irreparable loss of his rights under federal law. Once they issue a warrant, it goes out into the system. It hits the system. You now have a failure to appear. It might suspend his license, depending on where his license is and what the state does with it. But I mean, you've got a warrant now. And it's in Georgia, which I'm sure they're part of an interstate compact, and I don't practice law in Georgia, or never did, but I would imagine they notify everybody else, and so it spirals out and hits the whole country. It's not good. And somebody who's got a no criminal record doesn't want an arrest warrant for felonies and allow this court to consider the merit and then arrest him. So permit the removal. If you grant a simple extension, there's not going to be any substantial prejudice to Georgia. While federal courts will not enjoin pending proceedings lightly, a temporary pause here would not run afoul of the anti-injunction and anti-harassment statutes. This is going to protect federal interests flowing from the Supremacy Clause. They say, look, Mr. Meadows' grounds for removal here are very simple, but the case as a whole is complex. 19 defendants, 41 counts, 97-page indictment. This is going to take a lot of time, and state court proceedings are not stayed automatically as they would be with removal. Here, the state is threatening very quick arrests. We've got critical deadlines coming up, and so on. They say, Your Honor, as we've noted, Mark Meadows, our client, enjoys legal immunity pursuant to the Supremacy Clause and federal removal statutes. If Meadows is required to defend himself in state criminal proceedings, he's going to suffer loss in the form of maybe his ability to raise his defenses at a later time. In either case, a brief temporary stay of these proceedings will preserve Meadows' rights without substantially harming Georgia. And they're telling us why it's likely he's going to win removal, and so we'll fast forward through some of this. A stay is not going to harm Big Fanny. Therefore, the court should grant removal immediately and notify the state or issue an order prohibiting Big Fanny from ordering the arrest. Signed August 22nd, respectfully submitted by John S. Moran. And so that's 17 pages, 19 of 19, submitted by Mark Meadows and his defense team. And we've talked about the policy behind this. Public's interest supports protecting the federal officers so the federal officers can do their jobs. We don't want state-level prosecutors to be able to pop their heads up like a jack-in-the-box and say, don't like that candidate, so we're going to just indict him. And so we see that is broken down. That is the emergency motion. Now, the judge issued an order saying that Big Fanny had to respond to this, and so she did. But before we get there, this was the affidavit submitted by the attorney himself. So now he's submitting an affidavit. He's saying, Your Honor, look, I'm a partner at the law firm. I declare this to be true. Here's my exhibits. I got a copy of an emails from Big Fanny, and she's not cooperating with us. These are all of my exhibits. We simply requested a very simple extension to the hearing on Monday. I declare this all to be true under penalty of perjury. And then Fanny responds. So she just dropped this one, filed August 23rd, 13 pages long. She says the following. Mark Meadows, Your Honor, has made his motions, and now we are here responding to it. We're asking that the court dismiss or deny the emergency motion as is appropriate. Fanny's team says, Your Honor, following a lengthy investigation, we issued an indictment for racketeering, and we know that we've got a removal hearing on the 28th. Following the indictment, Big Fanny stated that she intended to provide the defendant, Mark Meadows, 2 weeks to voluntarily surrender. They requested the surrender date be postponed, quote, until next week. So Fanny's saying, well, they didn't ask for just one more day. They just said next week, which you could say, okay, how about Monday, which is when we have the hearing. All right. So, but she put it in quotes for whatever reason. She says here, the defendant did not actually request a particular date in which to extend his surrender and only offers to confer after the evidentiary hearing set by this court on August 28th. Well, right, because at the hearing on the 28th, they're successful and the case is removed. Big Fanny, your decision-making authority on this might change, right? He may not be responding to your deadline on the 28th anymore when the federal courts take it. Judge might decide to do something differently with it, maybe even dismiss the case. So he's saying, yeah, I'm not going to agree to show up at another hearing and self-surrender when I think my case is getting dismissed. But she's obviously perturbed about this as well. Did not actually request a particular date. All right. District attorney denied the request, and then Meadows again requested that he be afforded additional time to request for it. Fanny declined both. So then Mark Meadows, says Fanny, filed this emergency motion and asked for an immediate removal or an order to stop the arrest. Accordingly, Georgia, the state, submits this response as ordered. They say, Your Honor, Mark Meadows' contention that the case should be removed on the papers is meritless. Pursuant to U.S. Code, the filing of a notice of removal shall not prevent the state court from proceeding. The only limitation imposed on the state court pending a notice of removal is that the state court may not enter a judgment of conviction before the prosecution is remanded. Additionally, if the district court does not order the summary remand, the court shall order an evidentiary hearing. And saying, accordingly, the court is required to conduct an evidentiary hearing, and the state is not precluded from proceeding against them, even though, so she's just saying we can go in parallel, Judge. You have your hearing, I'm allowed to do this while you're doing that. Saying that Meadows and his reliance on this case law is misplaced. Both of those were decided before the enactment of that statute. And so they're saying you can't rely on those cases to support your claim. Additionally, this court, in compliance with the law, has promptly ordered an evidentiary hearing when everybody can be heard. The court has also allowed the state until today to file a written response to the notice, and we're going to demonstrate in our filing that they're not entitled to any summary decision. And so the defendant and the request to remove the case is a not so subtle request to invite the court to stop the state from proceeding. Accordingly, it should all be denied. Mark Meadows requesting that Big Fanny also be stopped from making the arrest violates long-standing principles requiring federal courts from abstaining in order to avoid the abstention doctrine. Meadows bears the burden of demonstrating that this was instituted in bad faith. And since he doesn't make those claims here, you can't stop us from conducting and issuing the warrant. In fact, federal courts have repeatedly denied requests to interfere in state cases, and they cite some cases. In essence, Meadows' emergency motion is a plea to the court to prevent Meadows from being arrested on the charges brought by Georgia. Despite his attempts to characterize this as a temporary pause, it is a request that the routine criminal processing be dictated by federal authorities. Here, the defendant does not allege that his prosecution is taken in bad faith, and there's no hope of obtaining a valid conviction. So, in other words, Meadows is not pleading this appropriately to justify what he's asking for. His claim that his status as a former federal officer heightens this routine procedure is baseless. Even if Meadows were under federal jurisdiction, he would still be subject to arrest and detention. Other federal officers include former President of the United States have agreed to voluntarily surrender. So Trump is saying, I'll show up, and Meadows is saying, but I don't need to show up. And she's saying, well, Trump is showing up, therefore Meadows should show up. That's not how that works. Additionally, Meadows' arrest will not preclude the defendant from asserting any state or federal defenses he may have. Just because one defense makes one claim doesn't mean all defenses have to take a certain strategy. People do different things all the time. They say Georgia criminal procedure provides that a law enforcement officer may arrest a person for a crime with or without a warrant. Generally, we issue warrants, and says Meadows' claim is meritless. Lawfully arresting a defendant on felony charges after allowing them time to negotiate their surrender doesn't impact him in any way. Okay, so she's basically just saying these things are entirely separate. I can do my arrest, you can decide your stuff, and he's got to deal with both of them at the same time. Even assuming that the court grants Meadows' motion to remove the case to federal court, prosecution still remains, and he's still subject to arrest for the offenses. Yeah, but that judge is in charge of all of this, not Big Fanny's judge. Accordingly, the defendant's request to enjoin the DA should be denied. As they say in conclusion from Fanny's office, U.S. Code requires the court to hold an evidentiary hearing on the removal. And Meadows' request that the court decide the issue immediately is incompatible with the statutory requirements. So Meadows wants it removed now, doesn't want to wait till Monday. She says there's no justification for now. You have to wait till Monday, and there is no justification for stopping it. They say further, Meadows has also failed to demonstrate any irreparable harm. This hardship facing the defendant is no different than any other defendants, and the Superior Court of Fulton has already issued an arrest warrant for the defendant, and this court is not authorized to enjoin such action pursuant. So I think Fanny's just going to say the warrants have already been drafted, but just not entered, right? So the judge has already granted them, but they've given them time before those warrants go into effect. So Fanny says, accordingly, this court should dismiss or deny the defendant's motion as appropriate. And this is going to be very curious to see what this judge does on this, because Fanny now is basically saying states' rights. Don't you dare, federal courts, come in here and try to interfere with our process. But she's also not adhering or agreeing with the federal court's hearing dates, basically saying I'm going to schedule this when I schedule it. You didn't get it done fast enough. Now Meadows has to be subject to Fanny's arrest, even though the case might be removed on Monday. I think the bigger question is going to be, what does Mark Meadows do? If the judge doesn't issue a ruling, well, we'll have to wait for a ruling. I'm going to guess he just follows the ruling. I don't think he'll get a warrant issued for him. So if the judge doesn't grant him something, I'm sure he'll show up, negotiate a consent bond, and they will push that thing through. But it's just been one thing after another over there. Big Fanny is doing everything she can, including not cooperating with one-day extensions when Meadows is filing his claim in federal court. We'll see what the judge says about it. as we continue to cover, my friends. We will look forward to seeing you as you follow along. Thank you for subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.
You, well, a little tired and not yourself since the vaccine and since getting COVID, then Dr. Peter McAuliffe may have the solution for you. The Wellness Company's got a great formula to take that spike protein out of your blood system and get you back to feeling pre-COVID self. And of course, we've heard that the new strand is going to come. So the most important thing to you right now is your health. So log on to the website, MakeCareGreatAgain.com. Check out our friends at the Wellness Company, Dr. Peter McAuliffe, developing this special formula to help you get back to that pre-COVID health. We're going to make our way underneath the wing here. We'll get President Trump to walk off of Trump Force One here. We're bringing this to you as it develops, very much like we did in D.C., New York, Miami, and now in Atlanta, Georgia, as we get back into position. Once the president gets off the plane, and from that point on, we will get in our vehicles and follow him over to the county jail for processing. Let's get a good camera position here to be able to get the president to walk off the plane here. Looks like Susie Wiles, one of the Trump advisors, stepping off the plane first. We'll try to give you a little bit of a head count of a roll call, rather, of who is getting off the plane as much as possible. We are getting a look at the service vehicles making their way around the tail of the plane, making their way on this side of it. And that's where President Trump will get in and make his way to the Fulton County Jail. We want to remind everybody, right now it's important to share this broadcast. Comment, share this broadcast, tag a friend. It's important that we get as many eyeballs on this broadcast as possible. And like Marjorie Taylor Greene said earlier, the MAGA mugshot, I do encourage everybody to post up these mugshots in support of President Trump, in support of what he's going through right now, and showing your love and support for the president to help fight the weaponization of this DOJ and this Fani Willis and others that are involved, and 18 other co-defendants here. So that's one way you can do it. And on social media, hashtag MAGA mugshots. Not familiar with the individuals getting off the plane right now. I would imagine they're likely some security detail as they get into the vehicles. We're going to kind of let this play out as it unfolds, and maybe we get a few questions with the president. We have not been told that's going to happen, but it's all up to however he feels at the moment. Of course, a lot has been probably going in the president's mind right now, being this fourth indictment. I would imagine he is in good spirits. I know the last time we talked to the president at the Iowa State Fair, he was in a great mood. He was there, big support there in Iowa at the fair. He's got big support really about just about every early state that he's been to. New Hampshire, South Carolina, Iowa in particular. So I would imagine he knows that America is supporting him and absolutely making their voices known that they overwhelmingly want the president to be the nominee for the Republican Party. And of course, if you look at the polls, his numbers after each indictment his approval ratings have been up, the poll ratings have been up, the fundraising has been up, because you can imagine how much this has got to take not only on the president as far as taking his mental focus away from campaigning, but also it's a financial strain, the legal battles that he has to deal with, the financial battles that he has to deal with. And that is the goal of many of these indictments. It's not necessarily for the indictment itself, if it's other than to bankrupt some of these people that don't have the means to fight a lot of these court cases. And so you've got one individual that did not post the bail and still remains in jail to this day from one of these indictments. So this is something that's not only a political burden, but it's also a financial burden as well. We're going to stay tuned. We'll see what happens here momentarily. We are live here in Atlanta, Georgia, awaiting President Trump to get off of Trump Force One. Don't forget to follow us across social media platforms right now. You can follow me at Brian Glenn TV on Twitter. You can follow me on Truth Social. It's one of my favorite, at Brian on Truth Social. And don't forget to follow us across every platform. Not only subscribe to us on Rumble, but make sure you're following the right side on Facebook, Twitter, and definitely Truth Social, Instagram as well, to make sure you stay in touch with everything. And don't forget also to sign up for our newsletter. Just go to rsbnetwork.com and click on the newsletter, subscribe, put just some minor details, information in there, and sign up for the newsletter. The door is about to come open on the motorcade, so I'm expecting, there he is right there, the president stepping out. Let's listen in. We're going to go ahead and move over to the shuttle here, as we've been instructed by the service detail. We're going to make our way to the first press van that you see there. We're going to shoot out the window as much as possible. Now, I'm going to note there will be no audio. Once we get inside this press vehicle, there will be no audio, so we will have to cut the audio and go to back to Vanessa Broussard, but we'll continue to double box this as we're live here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Hi, everyone. We are back here live in front of the Fulton County Courthouse. I'm Vanessa Broussard, bringing to you live coverage from Atlanta. Lots of people out here supporting President Trump. Great to see. When you come to these Democrat-run cities, you really don't know what to expect. Like, for example, when I was in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago when Trump turned himself in, tons of MAGA supporters out there, only a handful of protesters. Same case scenario here, only a few protesters, but everything's been peaceful and quiet, and it's been a really good sign for President Trump when he arrives here at the courthouse to see all these people supporting him. Hey, you know, the economy is really bad right now. A lot of people are struggling. I'm with you. Living paycheck to paycheck is not easy. A lot of you are working double jobs, 3 jobs just to make ends meet. So if you're thinking about your 401k, your IRAs, your future, what it may hold.
The political civil war continues. Newt Gingrich is warning that it's well underway. We know that prosecutions are taking place against Donald Trump and many people who were on his team, including his lawyers, for their roles in 2020 in challenging the elections. Now, as this civil war continues, Rudy Giuliani shows up in Big Fanny's district for a self-surrender. He's negotiated his bond and his release, and that has been executed. And so you see the mugshot. We think Rudy looks fabulous here, looks stern, looks like he is fortified, ready to go, and he's got his American flag pinned there. And we're going to hear him speak both before and after the self-surrender. Before we take a look at the consent order for Rudy, 2 other lawyers who have been charged with crimes for providing legal work on Trump's case. And then Newt Gingrich is going to remind us that this is really a political civil war that is already well underway, and they're utilizing the arms of the government to do it. So before Rudy went on down to Georgia for his self-surrender, he had a very strong statement for the media on CNN. Here's what he said.
To Georgia, and I'm feeling very, very good about it because I feel like I'm defending the rights of all Americans, as I did so many times as a United States attorney. People like to say I'm different. I'm the same Rudy Giuliani that took down the mafia, that made New York City the safest city in America, reduced crime more than any mayor in the history of any city, anywhere, and I'm fighting for justice. I have been from the first moment. I represented Donald Trump, and this is a man who has now been proven innocent several times. I don't know how many times he has to be proven innocent, and they have to be proven to be liars, actually enemies of our republic, who are destroying rights, sacred rights. They're destroying my right to counsel, my right to be a lawyer, destroying his right to counsel. It's not accidental that they've indicted all his lawyers. Never heard of that before. In
All the
America,
lawyers.
all the lawyers indicted. Now, whether you dislike or you like Donald Trump, let me give you a warning. It's going to come for you. When the political winds shift, as they always do, let us pray that Republicans are more honest, more trustworthy, and more American than these people in charge of this government. Because if our government is conducted this way, and the system of justice is politicized and criminalized for politics, your rights are in jeopardy and your children. Donald Trump told you this. They weren't just coming for him or me. Now they've indicted people in this case. I don't even know who they are. These are just regular people making a normal living. They're going to bankrupt them. They won't convict them.
They're going to be ruined. Rudy's got some eyeballs. He's got some history as a public official, and so he'll be able to weather the storm, no doubt. Same with some other people who are involved in this, but think about the blast radius and blast zone of the other people who got gobbled up into this. Many lawyers, many people working in official positions, many people doing what they thought was best and legal because it was stuff that had been done before in other elections, and they were investigating their roles. They were doing their job, doing their due diligence. But Rudy, as you can see, he is obviously upset about what is happening in this country, and he is, I think, a little bit more optimistic than maybe I am about Republicans taking over and governing a little bit more competently and honorably. With all due respect, I think that has sort of gone out the window now. I'm more interested in the Republicans. You know, it'd be very nice if we could have a whole country where everybody just played fair. They are not playing fair anymore. They are arresting and indicting the Republicans at huge numbers, and they are doing it, you know, every day. There's new indictments and there's new efforts to expand the scope of this stuff, and it's a big problem. So when the Republicans win, and of course they will at some point, we'll see what they do, but if they go back to playing patty cake and saying, we're better than them, well, then they're going to get steamrolled again. The Democrats have elevated this, and I'm hopeful that, you know, more people wake up to this new reality that we're living in, where the justice departments, the justice systems are not legitimate. And if the Republicans win again, they're still not going to be legitimate. The DOJ is still not going to be legitimate. Same with the FBI. So there needs to be some serious reform here. And maybe there will be, maybe there won't, but we're seeing the consequences of the Democrats' action here. Now, Rudy shows up and he actually does self-surrender. You can see he's right here outside Fulton County Jail. There he pulls up in his vehicle.
We are, in fact, there he is, the former presidential personal attorney, as well as New York mayor during 9/11 and DA in New York in the 80s, prosecuted many people, organized crime leaders under the very same statute he is now walking into that courthouse to surrender for. We are following another major breaking news story.
That's CNN. So you got to see Rudy go on in there. Let's take a look at the consent order for him. We've already gone through Trump's. Remember, Trump's was $200,000. And we were sitting here going, that's weird. Now, Rudy's is $150,000. Man, I remember Rudy was like a big part of this RICO charge. And if Donald Trump, led the whole thing, led the insurrection, almost tried to steal the country, was the chief racketeur of all of the 18 other co-defendants, why was Trump's $200,000 and Rudy's $150,000? I mean, it shouldn't have been like a magnitude difference. And if Rudy was like the chief of staff of the insurrection, why is he getting out on a $15,000 bond? Like, the whole thing is just ridiculous. Look at all these charges. So here is what they say. State of Georgia versus Rudy. William Louis Giuliani. Didn't know that. So Judge Scott McAfee, you see this was filed 8/23 out of the state of Georgia, Fulton County. Grants and orders that bond be set in the following amounts. 30 grand for the RICO. We've got solicitation, 10 grand for all of the other charges. Several counts of criminal conspiracy, more solicitation, false statements and writings, most of the same garbage that we saw in other counts. But again, it's so shocking to me. There are Proud Boy co-defendants and Oath Keeper co-defendants who are in custody and going to prison for decades. And we were told that they were too dangerous because they were planning and plotting and they were sending messages and all of these things. Remember, Enrique Tarrio wasn't there when any of this happened. And he's been in custody this whole time, probably going to prison for decades, even though he was an FBI informant at one point and was picked up by an FBI informant the day before January 6th. But he's going to prison for a long time. And I'm not saying Rudy Giuliani should go to prison. I mean, I'm saying this is more reasonable than what they've got. But if all of this is related and the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys were all part of criminal sedition seditious conspiracies, and they had dangerous telegram messages and all that stuff. Why are they in custody and these guys are out? I don't understand it. I think that maybe the J6ers should also be out so that we have some equal justice around them. They got no bond because they were so dangerous out of DC. It's nuts. Equal protection under the law, right? They'll go on CNN and tell us what a monster Rudy Giuliani was and how horrific Donald Trump was, and then they'll just issue a tip money bond amount for Donald Trump, $200,000. It's all laughable. The whole thing's just a joke. Defendant shall report to pretrial supervision every 30 days. So he's got to check in with somebody. That's new. That's not what Donald Trump had. Pretrial supervision. Okay, we call this pretrial services, which means he's got to report to somebody. And various states set these up in various ways. You get a phone number you call. He's probably going to have a direct person, but for other people, you get a phone number, you call, you check out. The defendant shall not violate the laws of the state. That's always normal. Shall appeal in court as directed. Shall perform no act to intimidate any person known to him in the administration of justice. Not communicate with any other person known to him to be a co-defendant except through their lawyers. Don't communicate with witnesses, and turn yourself in by Friday. If he does not turn himself, this consent bond order is null and void. And we didn't see that in Trump's either. So that's a little bit different. So Rudy shows up, Rudy turns himself in, and he's looking fabulous. He's looking great, looking strong. Rudy, we'll keep thinking of you. Other people also turn themselves in for providing legal work to the former president. Sidney Powell did the same thing. So you see here, she's looking fabulous. She's looking great. I think that she looks even, more rejuvenated and refreshed. 2020, they were busy. They were running all over the place. She's looking great now. And shout out to Sidney Powell. So let's see what's happening here. Sidney Powell also has a consent order. So same thing for her. $100,000. Wow. And I thought she was one of the chief architects. She's also going to be on pretrial supervision. I mean, look, this is horrific, by the way. Like, this is nuts that they're even being charged. My blood boils just looking at these. But it is also, their words don't match their actions, right? They are in the media hysterical for years. I listened to some lady on MSNBC say that they helped sack the Capitol and stuff, right? And that these people were orchestrating a conspiracy to literally steal the country and all this stuff. All right, $100,000 bond for like one of Trump's main lawyers? Seriously? All right. So they shall not violate the laws of any state, appear in court as directed. Also, this one expires if they don't accept it by Friday. Same issues there. Now, Jenna Ellis also showed up. She's looking fabulous as well. Shout out to Jenna Ellis over on Twitter and elsewhere, who was there fighting for Trump in 2020. And of course, his lawyer, she got charged too, because it's not just Trump. They're going after and trying to decapitate everybody who is even associated with him. And part of this, remember, is to chill speech and to chill activity and association, to chill the free association of people moving forward. So when they rig the election again, or attempt to, that people like Jenna Ellis won't come out and support the efforts the second go round, right? This is punishment to dissuade future conduct. 8/22, this got filed, another consent bond. This one's a little lower. Well, not really. Lower counts. So $100,000 bond on 2 counts. What a total scam. Got 1 count, solicitation of violation of oath. What, did she send a text message to? All right. So I guess they just rounded up for her. Or the other 2 RICO charges. Why did those change? Yeah, so they're just making it up, right? Well, look, they make it relative to your income, or they're supposed to do that, but apparently they don't do that. Okay, just so we can be clear how inconsistent and stupid this is. Bonds. When you post a bond, it's supposed to do something. They're afraid you're a flight risk. They're concerned that you're going to be a danger to the community if they let you out, or danger to yourself. Something. You're going to tamper with that, right? There's something they're concerned about. The ordinary thesis is you let people out of custody. The presumption is you let people out because that's in alignment with the presumption of innocence. So when you don't do that, when you articulate a reason to hold somebody or to post a bond, and you have to come up with a justification for it, one of them is a person is a flight risk. So you make them put up a bunch of money so that if they leave, that money is used to get them back or they forfeit it. And here, Trump's was $200,000. Now, I think he probably has more money than Sidney Powell. Probably. I don't know how well she does. Probably pretty well. But probably not billions. I don't think she's a billionaire. So why is Trump's, in order to secure his appearance, $200,000, but hers is $100,000? Why was her RICO bill was $40,000, but Jenna Ellis's RICO bill is $75,000? It's like somebody just threw darts at a board. It says Jenna Ellis. Well, we don't really like her that much. She only has 2 counts, but she's probably got $10K to post as the down payment on the bond. What's going on here? So it's just not the same thing. They're just shooting from the hip. You're like, well, I don't know. Rudy, I don't know. How much money does he have? $30,000. $10,000 for RICO? That sounds good. Let's make it a cool $150,000. So they probably work backwards. They're like, okay, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. They get here, they're like, all right, we're at 120,000. 120, that doesn't sound right. We need to round up. So we're gonna round up to 150. We'll make RICO 30,000. Perfect. There you go. 150. That sounds like a good, nice round number. What are they doing over there? Now, of course, their lawyers are negotiating all this as well, but it's just nonsense. These people apparently were going to organize an insurrection to take over the whole country, and these are their bonds. Shout out to Jenna. Shout out to Sidney Powell. Shout out to Rudy Giuliani and everybody else, right? These are the people that we talk mostly about here, which is why we're covering them. But there are other co-defendants here who don't have their spotlights that these people have and don't have the public backing that they do. So we're going to be thinking about them too. I am hopeful that there is some sort of, organization or effort to backfill these people legal fees from the GOP, the RNC, somebody, because this is a political attack by the Democrats. And Rudy Giuliani and Newt hit this right on the head. This is an attack, and it is a political civil war being waged with one brigade, which is the DOJ.
Fannie Willis will go down in American history as having conducted one of the worst attacks on the American Constitution ever when this case is dismissed.
Yeah.
She has violated people's First Amendment right to advocate the government, to petition the government for grievances, like an election they believe was poorly conducted or falsely conducted. People have a right to believe that in America. Biden and the Biden state doesn't have a right to tell you what the truth is. And number two, and I will tell you, if you need to know what this is all about, the FBI stole my iCloud account, and I went and stole it the day that I began representing Donald Trump 4 years ago.
This is on their end, not our end. That's on their end.
The day after I represented Donald Trump.
They cut to it.
So for all that time, federal government spying on Donald Trump and his lawyer. I am being indicted because I'm a lawyer, as is professor and everyone else.
Mayor, last month.
Why do we?
Mayor, right here, Mr. Mayor, you effectively
Mayor, will you be here tomorrow?
Oh, by the way, you're wrong. I didn't do that. I entered into a stipulation for the purposes of that case to move on. I specifically says I do not in any way admit the truth of those allegations. Those allegations are totally false.
You did not. Do you still believe the election was rigged, Mr. Giuliani?
You're wrong and you're lying, as you often do. If you read it, it says it was only for the purposes of that case and it was not an admission.
You had the opportunity. Still believe that the election was rigged, Mr. Giuliani? Do you still believe that the election was rigged?
Yes, hopefully. I'm sure he does. So, all right, so that's Rudy. He self-surrendered. Donald Trump is going to go through a similar process. We don't know if we're going to get a mugshot from him. I think that's doubtful. We'll see what they're trying to do. They are using every lever they have, every tool they have to try to stop him. And Newt Gingrich is right about this. This is turning into a political civil war.
The full
what would be useful, because the same reasons that make it kind of nuts to have a president sued civilly would also apply to being prosecuted criminally. But very good question. Cindy Banks is here, says, thank you, Rob. That was very interesting and informative. Chesebro is the attorney who recommended the alternate electors for all 6 states. Not fake electors, as the media describes, but alternate, as JFK used in Hawaii. Right, alternate doesn't mean illegal, means you have alternative plans, and that's exactly what they did. And there's historical precedent for this. And these people were complying with what they thought the law was, and they were sending in their notices to the archives and stuff. Because if Mike Pence would have done something differently, which would have been legal, because they now changed it, right? He had the ability to do it, but he didn't. Then that would have implicated, or all of these alternate elector contingency plans would have now been activated and absolutely legal. But Pence didn't do that. So how can they say that something that if he would have done would have been legal? In my opinion, maybe they said it would have still been illegal. Maybe they would have charged Mike Pence. But they didn't. So now they're going to charge it because I think part of their tactic is to just make sure that they don't have any attorneys moving forward. Good to see you, Cindy. John McGarvey says, catch this one, Zach. We got this one from Rocky. Says, Rob, I'm late and discombobulated. A general question. If a defense is arguing legal shenanigans in earlier trials, can they subpoena the judge in that past case to give a depo and to release any email communications he had with either counsel during that trial? So that would be like that's a tall order. That's a real big ask. You'd have to really see some evidence of malfeasance in order to crack that. Like, you're not just going to subpoena a judge and breach judicial privilege, in other words, without a real serious reason. And you're going to have to go up to a higher level judge. I mean, that would be a big order. Or get another judge to do it. So I'm trying to think of like a hypothetical. So are you saying, like, if Trump is prosecuted in Florida, could he get the Florida judge to subpoena the D.C. courts or something? Like, could they ask Judge Cannon to subpoena Judge Chutkan's emails? Is kind of how I'm hypothesizing your question. I would have thought there are rules against subpoenaing judges, but well, since we're spying on indicting lawyers these days, who knows? It's an interesting tactic, but I think that judges would make the same arguments that they are immune from those requests. They have privilege. They have protection against those disclosures, and you'd have to see something that would justify another judge granting that kind of really, really unusual request. It would have to be something very big. And I don't think a judge would do that. All right, so we've got another angle here.
To arriving there at the Fulton County Jail. Andrew, we are going to check in with you a little bit later here. We are going to, right now, put up a couple shots from outside of the Fulton County Jail as we wait for him to arrive. Andrew, we're going to touch base with you just very soon here as we leave this shot up for viewers. So we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much for that first bit of analysis, and we'll talk to you in just a little bit here.
Thank you.
So we see we're getting near to some buildings. The motorcade looks like it's slowing down a little bit. So they're off the freeways, getting closer to the facilities. And not a lot of people around these areas. Looks like they roadblocked all the roads. And there's no audio coming from them either. But okay, so we'll just keep following along. Good to see you, Rocky Water. Thank you for that. Don G is here. Thank you, Don, with the flying Superman pair in the house. Thank you, Don. I appreciate you sending that one in. We have Trump now turning up a road. Barb's loves Alaska. Says Kenneth's demand for a speedy trial, and it's granted by the judge. But what if Fannie isn't ready for the trial, or just that soon? Can she push it further out? I'm going to have more questions. Well, that's a great question, Barbs. And so she would not be able to push it out past the speedy trial deadline, right? The speedy trial deadline, as we saw, was November 3rd. So not past that deadline. So if she's not ready, then she's not ready. And that happens. I mean, that happens.
We're taking a live look overhead here as we've been following the motorcade as it makes its way to the Fulton County Jail. It looks like they might just
They're
be
right there, yeah.
There.
Look at that. See, the sign says no cell phones allowed in jail, authorized personnel only, pretrial services. So, like, that's the location where people go to check in when they're on release. And so they're getting pretty close. Now, once he goes in, I imagine we're not going to be able to see too much. And then he'll probably be in and out relatively quickly. Let's see what this woman says.
Security has this entire street on lockdown right now, waiting for the former president's arrival. But really, that's what we're expecting in the next couple minutes. And if you guys could hear supporters and protesters chanting behind us, "We love Trump. We want Trump." Again, they're waiting for Trump to get here. You do see a lot of protesters here just waiting for the former president to get here, just wanting to show support for the former president after the fourth indictment here. Now, again, once the motorcade does arrive, Trump will see this large group of protesters and supporters. And what we're hearing from protesters right now is that they believe this indictment is politically motivated. They believe this is all part of a greater attack against the GOP frontrunners.
Yeah, that's right. They're absolutely right about that. So the analogy here, Barbs, what happens oftentimes, you see this like speedy trial stuff pop up in DUI cases. Something that happens in DUI cases is sometimes they can't get the blood results back. Usually alcohol results they can get back pretty quickly because alcohol testing is a lot simpler. They use gas chromatography in a lot of situations, where drug crimes use mass spectrometry, and that is a much more complicated process that requires much more sophisticated equipment and more parsing out of the drug. So, for example, with DUI, if you know a bunch of people are drunk, you can kind of tell, smell it. This is a DUI when I pull this person out. They draw all the vials, and they put all the vials in this big pizza tray, and the pizza tray has these little slots in it. They put the big pizza tray into the machine, and it pokes holes, and it sucks the air out, doesn't actually test your blood, and then that's what it does. And they can do huge batches of that, like 90 people at a time or whatever. That's when they know it's alcohol. And if it's above the legal limit, then boom, they don't need to do another investigation into the rest of the blood. So that usually can happen very quickly, right? They can turn those samples around relatively fast. But when it comes to drugs, it's more complicated because you don't know exactly what drug it is. You don't know if it's heroin, you don't know if it's meth, you don't know if it's a cocaine, if it's an upper or downer, if it's a prescription drug, could be a narcotic drug, could be all sorts of things. So in that instance, sometimes they can't figure it out for a while, and they have to do second confirmatory and quantitative tests to identify what's in the sample. And if those take a while, sometimes it'll take longer than 6 months. And if you've got a speedy trial deadline within the 6 months, you can say, I want my trial now. You show up, they're not ready. They've got no choice but to offer you a smoke and plea deal or to dismiss the case. And that can happen. So, Chesebro might be trying to do that same thing. I don't know if it's going to be fruitful or not, because they're telling us that Fannie's been working on this case for years now. I mean, I would imagine she is prepared. I would imagine she's ready to go. Devin Knox is here, says Trump should start or should make shirts with his mugshot on them. I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. I think that's a great idea. He should sell them hard. So Zulu says, totally situationally independent question. Totally situationally independent question. Says, beyond seriousness of charges, danger to society, and ability to flee, what are other boxes to check for denying release? Like, say someone hits that trifecta in spades, for example. What else mitigates? Oh, well, not much in that situation. First of all, Zulu, thank you for this one. Very generous super chat, and I appreciate that. So not much. So if somebody is... So you try to mitigate the concern, all right? So it's a great question, but you try to mitigate the concern. So for example, if somebody is a flight risk, but not a danger to society, and somebody's also not a harm to themselves, and they're not going to commit another crime, but we're just concerned that they might flee a little bit, that's when you post a big bond, that's when you post ankle monitoring and stuff like that. And so you try to mitigate that risk, that concern. You don't come back and say, well, the person has an ability to flee. You would make arguments, about that to counter that. So some mitigating factors for somebody's ability to flee would be, they're not going to go anywhere. He's married. His wife and kids are here in Arizona, and they go to school right around the corner in Phoenix. They're not going anywhere. He's not fleeing the country. His wife is here. They're back in the courtroom. His mom is here. He's got a job here. He's been working here at a factory or at a location for 25 years. His mom lives in Scottsdale. His sister lives in Gilbert. He's not going anywhere, right? He's not going to flee the country. So you make those arguments, and also you would get letters, and you would say, this guy's been a great employee. This guy shows up at my group. This guy does all those things. So that would be mitigation for that. Now, if he's a danger to society, you would make those same arguments, and you say, no, he's not. He's got no criminal record. You'd give up his guns or something, Your Honor. We would make an exchange. He promises to give up his firearms or something, and you'd make exchanges for that. But if they cross a certain threshold, then there is no, the judge is just going to say there's nothing that you can do to mitigate the danger part of that person, and so we cannot let them go. So if you hit somebody that is the trifecta, they're not going to get out. Now, you can always, and to also answer this a little bit with more depth, when the charges themselves are dangerous, like if it's an assault involving, in Arizona, for example, certain crimes are non-bondable. So you just cannot get out of custody, period. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter what you do, what you say. Now, you do get to challenge those. You do get to have hearings on non-bondable offenses. So you can make the argument after the fact after somebody has been arrested that they should be released, but you have to have a separate hearing. And you've got to show, essentially, that their original determination that your client met those checkboxes are all invalid. So the burden shifts to you once the finding has already been made. So so release conditions are very important. And there's a lot that goes into these, which is why Trump and his team and everybody coordinated these well before they actually walked into court. If someone hits that trifecta in spades, they're probably going into custody. And I've had people leave. Like, I've had people, flee countries, flee the country and just leave, cut off their ankle monitor and they're gone. And so, you try to mitigate that, and I've been burned on that, made arguments to the judge. No, they're not going anywhere, and then they're gone. You're like, oh, well. So sometimes you just don't know. And it's a balancing act, it's a routine, and the judges try to do their job. But from our perspective, from a defense perspective, we have the presumption of innocence, right? So they've got to really, and nobody's been found guilty yet at all at this stage of any case. So if they're going to hold your client in custody, they're kind of dumping on the presumption of innocence, and it's very irritating. But the judge also has to make sure that the guy who's being charged with aggravated assault or with sexual assault doesn't go out there and do it again, right? And if the evidence, if the presumption is great, if there's proof positive and the presumption is great, is how we say it in Arizona, that the release conditions will be affirmed and upheld, they'll affirm and uphold those. And it's tricky too. I've had clients, first-time charges, and I represented one guy, first-time charges on serious charges that were non-bondable. And it's like shocking. I can't even get out? No, man, because this is what they said you did. But I didn't do it. I know, but this is what they said. So, it turns into a big, kind of a shocking thing for people. Because the statutes just say they're just non-bondable. Anyways, great questions, Julie. Thank you. Hopefully I answered that, but very good one. John is here. Thanks, John. John McGarvey says catch this one, Zach. Zach caught it, baby. He caught it. It's right there. Thank you, Zach. Bodie says, could Trump's team use Fannie's comments in the trial? So it's a good question. Probably not in the trial. And let's pause on this for a moment, because I think this is a very good question. Couple questions that I've gotten is, can all of the 11.5 million documents from like the January 6th case in DC, can all of those be used as part of public record? Or can can 2,000 mules or something be used in these cases? And the answer that I think we're going to see in trial is going to mirror the same questions that we got back during the Proud Boys trials and during the Oath Keepers case, where they said that unless it is relevant, directly relevant to the evidence presented in the trial, they're not going to include it. So, for example, 2,000 Mules came out after January 6th, and I think you have a difficult time getting that movie in, because you can't make the argument that Trump or Meadows or anybody relied on the film to make their decisions. So they can't rely on it, therefore it's not really relevant to the trial. But the underlying, evidence, like if they did investigate fraud, like that might be able to come in, because it was independently part of their mindset back when they were making these decisions. So they're going to split it that way, right? 2,000 Mules, it came out, but maybe if they can say, well, some of the evidence we found independently before that, it might come in. Same thing with Fannie's arguments. I think that they could certainly use those social media posts in pretrial motions. They could argue that this is malicious prosecution, she's violating her ethical rules, and all sorts of stuff. But ultimately, the judge might say, the charge here, because remember, we start with the charges. They're saying that Trump committed this racketeering conspiracy and he committed these overt acts. If the bit of evidence you're using is to try to rebut the overt act, a lot more likelihood that the relevance is going to come in. But not anything, because the judge is just going to say it's not close enough. And we saw this with the Proud Boys, and it drives me nuts, especially as a defense on the defense side, because our defenses are often very broad, right? We want to expand the scope. There's an image of Trump. Now the clarity is bad. It's pollution or dust or something. We want to get everything in, and we want to just talk about, 2,000 mules and every filing that we saw in every court of law and relitigate every bit we can. But the judge's perspective is that we've got to narrow this stuff up, we've got to keep it contained and keep things on track so that we don't spiral off into issues that are not before the court. And we see how those things get exploited. I mean, we've seen how in like the Judge Kaplan case, which is the E. Jean Carroll case, that the judge just kind of kept out stuff that was good for Trump and let in things that were bad for Trump. And so these rules can be very exploitive, right? They can be curtailed in a way that will create the outcome. Good question, Rose. Made is here, says, regarding the Georgia case, I'm trying to understand how the 10th Amendment sets precedent here. Thank you for helping us to figure everything out. Always a great show with information. Thank you. So, I think what you're asking about is, I think your question is about separation of the federal system versus the states. So the 10th Amendment is generally referred to for states' rights, right? Everything that the Constitution doesn't grant to the federal government is reserved to the states. So we get the rest of that. And I'm not sure where your question is trying to get at with that, but I think maybe there's a distinction between Fannie being able to prosecute under state authority and what is the delineation between federal authority. And certainly I believe in states' rights, and I think that states should have the authority to go and prosecute things on their own ends. I would actually prefer states to have more authority than the feds. I think states should be able to govern themselves and claw back some of that authority that has been usurped by the federal government. But I think the conflict that we have here is not so much about the 10th Amendment per se. It's kind of that, it's almost the reverse of it, right? The 10th Amendment reserves everything else back to the states. But Fannie is almost doing the opposite. She's almost encroaching not into states' rights, she's encroaching into federal rights. She's going the opposite way and saying, I can prosecute basically this national federal case that encompasses, she referenced everybody. She referenced Michigan and Pennsylvania and Arizona. So it's not as much that the feds are encroaching onto states' rights as it is that the state is encroaching onto federal rights. And that's why Meadows was asking for removal, so that federal resources could come in and govern this thing appropriately. We got Tim the Mechanic. Good question, Major. Tim the Mechanic says, Trump fears nothing. Wonder if Secret Service gets processed with him, or if they're ready to go blows. Well, hopefully there's no blows that go down there. But it is true that Trump doesn't fear much. He talked about that on the Tucker interview last night. And maybe if you've got time, we'll go check that out. But Barbs Loves Alaska says, what are Kenneth's charges again? And how many have the same charges? And with his speedy trial, can this be a great way to mess up Fannie's case, as he's going to use evidence to debunk her phony charges? So it's a good question. So Kenneth has only a couple charges. He doesn't have many serious charges. And I think we can take a look at that. Let's see what they're talking about here.
Process, but then also look back to the other 3 indictments as well. And I was going to ask you touched on it there, the security risks for Secret Service that come with booking a former president, because he is the first former president to go through this and to also be getting a mugshot.
Well, it's completely and totally unprecedented, exactly. And, again, just so everybody's clear, I'm not advocating, treat him different because of elitism and he's important and he's a VIP. That's not the point. The point is, it is unusual. He is under the guard of the Secret Service. They are responsible for his safety and security. He was, after all, president of the United States. I don't care how much you hate him. He was president, okay? And so it's just absolutely uncharted waters. But back to the global landscape of the 4 cases, if you want.
All right, so this is Chesebros. So he's got $100,000 bond. He's got actually more charges than I thought. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 criminal conspiracies and RICO. And they charged his criminal conspiracies at $15,000 a pop. $10,000 for 2 of those. So counts 17 and 18 are less expensive than counts 9, 11, 13, and 15. And then they make it a cool $100,000 for him. They just round it up as well to make it a cool 100. So it could be a way to mess up Fannie's case. She seems to think that she's ready to go on this, like it would not mess her case up. Like she's perfectly happy with this going now. And so we'll see what the judges do over it. I think that if Trump wants more time, he should have more time. They've had years to investigate this. And so Trump, if he wants more time, he should have it. But it's a good question, Barbs. Isaac Bowles says, saddest day of my lifetime. Hang in there, Isaac. I know it's sad, my friend. I get it. I understand it. I know we've gone through a lot of this. And listen, I understand that we've been through, it is important to also remember that we have been through something very significant here. 4 indictments in 5 months. It's insane. 4.5 months. All historic, all in the middle of a political campaign. It has never happened in this country, and now they've done it 4 times, and they're just kind of picking up the pace here. So it is sad. It is a sobering day. It's a very somber day, certainly. It's an outraging day. But this is part of the process of exposing who these people are, right? These people have always existed. They've always been operating this way. They've always been hiding in the shadows, plotting and spreadsheeting and text messaging and phone calling. They've always existed. Now they're just showing us who they are. They're emerging, and we're getting to see how they abuse power full out on display. And as sad as it is, right, this energy is also awakening people. It's also spreading out there, and I think that more and more people are going to realize that the justice so-called systems that we have are just no longer legitimate. And it's a sad state of affairs. I mean, I believe in justice. I, went to law school, wanted to practice law to do justice. I still want to do justice. It's a sad state when we see that our justice systems are not doing it. It's like, wow, that sucks. I kind of believed in that for a while, but it is our current environment. And I would rather know who these people are and have them expose themselves than have them lurk in the shadows and continue to do this stuff under our noses. Now they're out. Now we can see it. And my friend, we are going to win all of this, right? And it may not be the exact victory that we're all looking for, but we are on the right side of history on this. These are the people who are trying to censor and eliminate their political opponents, and they know not what they do. This is a really consequential thing for them. They're happy they're popping champagne bottles or doing cartwheels, but they are on the wrong side of the universe, quite frankly. And we can get into that another time, but hang in there, Isaac. Salty Sarge says, Rob, I know you love Arm Day, but Leg Day is not the worst. The day after Leg Day is the worst. That's true. I did Leg Day yesterday, and my legs are feeling a little bit wobbly today. I noticed that. Hey, look, it's the Washington Monument. Did you see that Washington Monument? That was only 1/8 the size of Trump's documents. Only 1/8 the size of Trump's documents in his discovery files. Let's see if they put that back up. Rosie's here, says Trump getting indicted again feels like that movie Groundhog Day. I think I hear the Sonny and Cher song in the background. They say we're young and we don't know, babe. I got you, babe. From Rosie Posey. It is. It's like every indictment it just takes the energy out of it. If Trump is so criminal, then they wouldn't need to keep selling us indictments, one after another, more indictments, more indictments. Nobody believes it, so they just do it again and do it again and do it again. We got this one from Stephen. Thank you, Stephen. Stephen Mosher is in the house, and I appreciate that, Stephen. And so Economaths here says, if the cases are severed, the state of Georgia will just have to try the state charges in federal court for removed defendants, assuming the charges not dismissed with prejudice. So they'll try the state. So Fannie tries the state charges in federal court for the removed defendants. From Economath. Thank you for that, Economath. That sounds right.
In Atlanta, and that includes Fox 5's Tyler Fingert, who's on the ground there at the Fulton County Jail. Tyler, thanks again for joining us here. We appreciate all of these updates. Tell us a little bit more about what's happening right now and what you're seeing.
Well, Lexi, good afternoon or evening to you. Good to be back with you. And I can tell you right now, I just checked the Fulton County jail log. Officially, he has been released. According to that, he has been booked and now officially released from the Fulton County Fulton County Jail on all 13 charges he is facing here in Georgia. And so basically the process he likely went through while he was inside the jail was
I'm going to stop you just for a quick second, really quick, because we have another box up here. Sorry to interrupt you, but we have another box up here showing viewers what's happening. It appears the motorcade is actually leaving right now. So you're right, he has been released. Out. You can see a bunch of vehicles leaving right now, Secret Service vehicles leaving along with him. So as we watch this, just wanted to let viewers know what we're looking at. Continue telling us about how that process worked.
And so with the motorcade now moving, likely that would mean if he's going to go out the same way he came in, he will not come where we are. We're on the right street side. He is over on the Jefferson Street side, which is where some of our other cameras are. And if he follows the same protocols that Rudy Giuliani did yesterday, he will likely go to his bail bondsman to have to sign some documents. That's what Rudy Giuliani did yesterday. So we are hearing, we do have and are hearing that he is about what bail bondsman he did use. I'm sorry, I'm just checking emails that are coming through, seeing if emails about a mugshot possibly being released. I'm just trying to look through it.
Yeah, take your time. Take your time.
But so essentially, if all protocols that they did yesterday, he will then go to his bail bondsman, sign some documents before heading back to the airport, where, as you know, and we've been reporting for hours at this point, he will then speak to reporters under the wing of his jet over at Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson International Airport. So that will happen at some point over the course of the next probably hour or so. He's not really expected to be on the ground that long here. He is really expected to come for this and pretty much immediately leave. He landed, just after the 7 o'clock hour. He got here just about 7:34. And now already by 8 o'clock, he's already out of here. So less than 30 minutes to get booked, which is obviously the expedited process, and we were expecting that. So the one thing about a mugshot, we were initially told by the Fulton County Sheriff's Office the other day that every single person the mugshot would be released. But, there's a big but, they would send out that mugshot of everyone, all the mugshots, at 4 o'clock, around 4 o'clock Eastern time every single afternoon. Since former President Donald Trump is being booked, at about 7:30 at night, we may not get to see that mugshot until sometime tomorrow. But we did see some of those defendants who were booked in yesterday or the day before that. I believe Jenna Ellis was one of them. Actually posted their own mugshot on social media and used it as their profile picture. So that is one way that we may be able to see what that mugshot looked like. Again, former President Donald Trump, though, already on the move. Not sure where he's heading at this point. If all indications are what it was like before, he does have to work with a bail bondsman to get the signatures. But that could also all be done remotely. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But really here, since he's already moving, he's likely not coming out on the right street side, already on the move on the Jefferson Street, heading back towards either the airport or to his bail bondsman. But still a lot of people out here just waiting, a lot of supporters out here, well over 100. You see a lot of Trump, former President Donald Trump flags, like the one right behind me, one beyond over there, a lot of MAGA gear as well, as folks came out here to support the former president as he was set to be booked here at the Fulton County Jail. And as, again, we can now report he has been released after going through the booking process and is now on the move once again.
All right,
we have more video of that.
Looks like a fake mugshot going around on Twitter right now.
So it will be interesting to
so a lot of people are reposting this, but I think it's fake.
We'll have to wait
So be very careful about that one. If you think there's a real mugshot going around, here's what's going around. I'll show you. It looks like a Photoshop. So for example, here we got Post Millennial. Post Millennial says Trump mugshot. I think this is fake. I do not think that is real. All right. That's not the same tie, first of all. So he had a red tie on, and that is not the same tie. So I don't think that's real, but it is flying all over the place. Yeah, I think it's fake. So just be cautious about that. And yeah, here's another. Let's see. I'm pretty sure that's fake. Yeah, here, somebody posted this. Trump exits. He's got a red tie on there. I think it's a fake one. So, yeah, just be careful about that. A lot of people are trying to say that it's out. Now, let's see if there is one coming out, but I don't think that's it.
County District Attorney Fani Willis filed that she would like the trial to start in March. Okay, RICO trials are incredibly complex. They take time. It is not something that you can just snap your fingers and it goes to trial, because there are, in this case, 19 defendants. You had one of the defendants file that they want to have a speedy trial, which they are entitled to. And then District Attorney Fani Willis filed today that, hey, we could do the trial starting in October. And so that is going to be something that we're going to have to wait and see. The judge, Scott McAfee, has not made that decision yet, but that is something that we are going to be monitoring here locally, and of course will be that will be passed around as soon as we get more information.
All right, Trump's making his way back. New York Times has an update for us. Trump's booking seemed particularly speedy. His motorcade is now headed back to Atlanta. Wow, Trump had a mugshot taken. A first for him in his indictments, and once was again fingerprinted, according to two people familiar with the arrest. So Trump had a mugshot. That's according to Maggie Haberman. So I'm sure we're going to get it dropped any minute. And we'll just hang tight for it. So
would be able to best proceed, because they have to make sure that every single person involved in this case is able to have the legal counsel and be able, that those attorneys and those lawyers can be able to have the best defense for every single person involved in this case. And that does take time. RICO cases, racketeering cases are very long. I mean, right now, Georgia is dealing with the YSL trial, the Young Slime Life. It is the gang and racketeering trial that's been going on since January. They have not seated a jury in that case. That's been going on since January. We are now in August, almost September, and they still haven't even selected all the jurors yet, or any of the jurors yet, to even get that trial started. And that's a RICO trial. So that's something, unfortunately, we're going to have to continue to monitor about when something like this unfolds, because of the fact that it is just it's going to be such a complex case to bring to trial here. Lexi?
Sure. Tyler, thanks so much. Great job giving us a recap of what we need to know right now. We really appreciate that update, and we're going to continue to check in with you guys. So as of now, he has left the Fulton County Jail. Tyler Fingert there reporting live from Atlanta. Tyler, we'll talk soon.
Have a good one.
All right, and you're taking a live look here overhead as we're watching this motorcade here head back to the Atlanta airport, and now
all right, here is the
Trump is going to Bedminster, but we are expecting some sort of commentary here, potentially at the airport before he gets on his plane to react to all that happened today. And again, that mugshot, everybody is wondering about. When are we going to see it? How long will that take? Tyler giving us a good explanation there of why this can be so complex and why we don't know exactly what the timing looks like with that just yet. But let's take a quick commercial break here. We still have much more to bring you. So many live looks as we're following this happening live in real time. The motorcade heading there back to the Atlanta airport. Will take off then from Bedminster. All of this happening very quickly, a very quick moving process from the moment he landed.
It was fast. All right, so this is the jail record. Thanks, V, for sharing this over here. We've got Trump has officially been booked and released. You see here, Palm Beach, number of charges, bond posted in all of the amounts, $10,000 all across the board, plus the $80,000 to bring it up to a cool $200,000. Address over in Palm Beach. He's got blonde or strawberry hair. Blonde or strawberry hair. Oh, okay. So it's an interesting image over on our locals. Anyways, so Trump has been booked and released, and we'll see what he has to say about this when he gets back to the airport. All right, let's see what we've got over from our friends. And let's hear from you as we wait for the mugshot and for Trump's, hopefully he says something. We got Trump, who is Jake Sullivan over on our locals, who is our national security advisor. He says, okay, Rob, Trump's motorcade camera is only because Fannie's court camera, when she dramatically brought in the holy indictment. This is racist. This is bigotry. I cannot believe he's doing this. I'm calling Pete. So this, of course, is Jake Sullivan, who is our national security advisor, who went to Oxford. He's very smart. And he's going to call Pete Buttigieg because they hang out together. And he's a huge fan of Fannie. And we're a huge fan of Jake Sullivan. Smartest guy on our entire locals. He went to Oxford. And he's much smarter than us. And he doesn't have to answer questions if he doesn't want to. Thanks, Jake. Good to see you. We got this one from John McGarvey. Thank you, John. Bringing in 5 new members. We got Jop is joining us. We got Ross M. No mandates. Not a Fed is in here. Yeah, right. Not a Fed. That's definitely an FBI agent. Welcome. Welcome. Mike Holmed and Michael S. all coming in courtesy of John McGarvey. Thank you very much, John, for modding and for membering us up. We got this one from Jason. Says, happy Thursday. Jordan should have written to DA Fannie that they were working on the anti-Fannie legislation. Anti-Fannie legislation. Sounds important. I think we need that.
Live looks that we're following.